to hear a pitter-pat, and that happy tune is your step. Life can be so sweet on the sunny, sunny, sunny side of the street.
Hi, welcome to another Sunny Side of the Street. I'm your host, Todd Gross, clinical psychologist, and our show talks about people and organizations that really try to help other people make a difference, to have some impact. And we've done a variety of topics, as you know, for over the years. But one of the topics that has always seemed extremely important to me has been the education of our children. And people who are trying to do things to make sure that that education is the best it can possibly be. So we're talking about people that do research and on different methods and are very familiar with trying to assess how schools actually deal with students. Well, today we're very lucky to have somebody that has been involved nationally and very importantly in some of the studies that have been done about schools. And so we're going to be talking about her, and I'm going to introduce her. Her name is Carolyn Grimm. Hi, Carolyn. How you doing?
Hi, Todd.
And let me tell you our viewers a little bit about her first before we start, that Carolyn leverages decades of educational excellence to apply to her work at Agora Education Research, which we'll be talking about some. Founding investments after layoffs at the National Center for Education Statistics, which is NCES. She's well-versed in education practices with expertise in language education and measurement. Previously, she served the NCES in Washington, D.C. between 2010 and 2025 as an education statistician, a psychometrician, and study director for the Middle Grades Longitudinal Study, the first national level study of middle grade students in the United States. And the study set innovative standards for longitudinal design and implementation, taking 13 years to complete. Dr. Grimm also works as a research scientist and psychometrician at the Center for Applied Linguistics and was a principal investigator on a major grant through the Department of Education, developing methods for teaching nonverbal and cross-cultural communication skills to language learners. She holds a PhD in education research, measurement and evaluation from Boston College, and she is fluent in English, French, German, and Spanish. So that's a lot. That's pretty impressive. So we're glad to have you. That's the bottom line of all this.
Thank you, Todd.
Thank you for being here. All right. Well, maybe as a way to start, let me ask you a little bit, Carolyn, to explain a little bit about the role you played for decades in researching and analyzing education data, because people may not know too much about what that's like.
Right. I started as a French teacher.
Oh, really?
Yeah, back in the 70s,
yeah.
And but it maybe wasn't enough for me. I really just enjoyed learning about how students were learning language.
Yes.
And I began to look at different things that others had not looked at, and that is how nonverbal communication influences understanding. And that when Americans went to Paris and said, oh, you know, those French people, they don't really like us. And I say, no, they love you. They love Americans. You're probably misreading some cues,
yeah,
or you're not synchronizing with them in the way that they have a different rhythm and way of posturing. Mm-hmm. And, you know, nonverbal communication makes up about, I don't know, according to Albert Mehrabian in the 70s, who did some research on this, about 85% of communication or more really is the nonverbal, and intonation and, you know, other aspects of language that aren't just the words. So I got super interested in that. In the 80s, I worked with Lawrence Wiley at Harvard University on a method he actually established, and he and I worked together to create an interactive video program to teach these skills. And that's how I got that U.S. Department of Ed grant in 1988, which I had 2 grants during the 80s and 90s. And that was great. It was wonderful, but I didn't have a PhD, so I could never be a full professor. I could only be a research professor at any of these universities. So yeah, I just, I did get that grant. I thought it was wonderful, but then I just had stopped because I needed to get the PhD. I went to Boston College, got the educational research, and then after graduating, so all this at a much older age. Remember, this is one of these two career situations.
Yes.
You know how people have more than one
absolutely.
These days. And there at the age of 56, I graduated with my PhD from Boston College.
To you for that.
And then went and got an offer. I got offers locally, but the best offer I got was in Washington, D.C. So I'm like, I'm going to go down and check it out. I'll go for a year or two and see if it really, I love Boston. I always want to be in Boston, but I do, this is my first job out. I'll go and then maybe I'll come back. It didn't quite work out.
Sometimes it surprises you what happens.
It doesn't always go the way you think. It actually went really well. I was there for 2 years working on the WIDA Access for ELLs test, which is used throughout the country now by states to test students, ELL students, when they enter the system and track them on their proficiency in order to know when to mainstream them into the classroom.
ELO stands for?
I'm sorry, English Language Learners.
Okay, just in case
Access for ELLs. It's a standardized test. There's the SAT and all the, MCAS and all the big standardized tests that you know about. My degree was in psychometrics, and that's the science of testing.
Right.
Because and I'll go back to the original thing with the nonverbal, I needed a way to test that people had acquired the nonverbal skills.
Yes.
That's what got me into it. I'm like,
okay,
how do you test to know that somebody actually knows to do this? Just like you take a reading test. You give kids that NAEP reading test or the Woodcock-Johnson reading test, any of the reading tests to know how are they progressing.
Right.
Are they actually getting it? Because you can't, just look at them and say, yep, looks like they learned it.
Yeah. And I'm really interested in how you develop, the behaviors that are nonverbal, because that's very interesting. I know people will talk about, different aspects of things that you can look at under the label of intelligence. But the nonverbal, I believe strongly that is really accurate about how much we get from nonverbal cues. And teachers send them out and kids read them, to different degrees.
Well, there are two big categories of nonverbal. One is emblemic gestures. So if I go in French anyway, if I go like this, it means you're lying.
Oh, really?
Or the famous.
Yes.
We have some similar things in English. So what are those emblemic gestures? They're really like a gesture vocabulary that everybody knows, or this one.
Yes.
This is you're drunk. Emblemic gestures.
So there's common knowledge in a sense of what this is communicating.
Yeah, if you're in France, you know what those.
But a different culture, they might not know.
But in English, we would have. But the other much more important aspect of nonverbal is the synchronicity in communication, and that is turn taking, how rapidly you speak. All the rhythms of communication. So what you really want to do is teach people what it feels like to be in communication with a French person, going at the rate that they go. And what we found was that your listening comprehension is vastly improved when you're on the same wavelength and synchronicity as the whatever language person it is you're talking to.
Right.
So what we had was this video methodology where we did really like method acting with the French, German, or Spanish model, so that you learned a script of a real conversation and you entered into it to feel what. That's why the name of the project was Dans la peau des Français, in the French body. So you would put yourself in the body of a French person
that's fascinating.
To completely empathize with how it feels to be a French person. So not just little emblematic gestures and the little fun stuff, that people know about, but more of an experiential learning of language. But the problem was it sounds pretty highfalutin and hokey pokey. How do you prove that somebody actually improved, from doing this? You need tests.
That's right.
People nobody's going to change their curriculum based on hearsay. They need evidence, and that's going to be my theme here today, and that's why we're sitting here today, and that is the attitude toward the idea of evidence in making policy decisions and in choices that schools or teachers or anybody might want to make. Do I make it because my friend told me it was great, or do I look at all the literature and the studies and it looks like it really worked with the kind of people that I work with, all that.
So that's the real importance, to have evidence behind whatever your practices are. For school systems, for teachers, for individuals, even communicating I know in my field in psychology, if there's a couple, how they communicate, how they deal with the gestures, you have to have some evidence about different methods of communication that are more effective than others.
And there's quantitative methods, there's qualitative methods, there's not just one way to have this evidence. There are many different ways, and so that's what we always try to do. I'm a psychometrician. We're about measurement. It's about multiple measures, different ways of measuring, like outcomes and processes, and then how to communicate that to the people who might use the methods or the materials or the whatever thing it is they want to adopt in their practices.
I hear you. And I'm interested also in, it was mentioned before that you did a longitudinal study, and those are interesting. I'd like to hear your comments on that, where you're really looking at something over a period of time. And what are we contributing when you do those studies? That people will get a sense that these things have real impact.
That's what that's actually a kind of gold standard longitudinal study. That is, when you can take that same child, I'll be talking about children here because that's our main, K through 12 is our big concern here.
Sure.
But you take that same child and you follow that same child across the years and see what happened to them for various reasons on the thing you're interested in. That's the best way to do this, really. The things that we are more familiar with are what we call cross-sectional studies, like the National Assessment of Education Progress, which comes around. I know everybody in every state who might have, been teaching in a school probably got asked by the government to participate in NAEP, so that they come into the schools and measure the kids for their reading skills and their math skills and also other skills. But those are just a snapshot. Those are a snapshot of the child's reading skills. And those students, in that case, they're de-identified. We're not actually tracking that kid. We're getting, on average, and it's also nationwide, what is the reading skill of kids in the United States, or kids in Massachusetts. You can get down to somewhat granular level, but not to the individual. But to know, are the schools doing the job that they should be doing? But that's a cross-sectional study. Okay. And those are easier to do than longitudinal studies, because just coming in and asking school, could you just let's do this little test once with your kids and we'll never see you again. We'll never bother you again. But with a longitudinal, you're asking the school and the parents permission to come back next year and the next year and the next year. Right. And you get a lot of sample attrition with this because that's a big ask. But we do all kinds of incentives and so forth. But when you had that data, Oh my gosh, you can do amazing things.
That's what I wanted I wanted to hear a little bit about the power of that data from your experience. And also, it's really clear that when you're talking about what is data and what kind of conclusions you reached, it becomes intertwined with politics. And so I know that there's a lot of stuff that happened that you can talk about personally from the experience of working in the roles you are, how politics gets into trying to interpret data, and there can be things that happen that really undercut the facts that you're getting.
Yeah.
And you've experienced that in terms of, you'll talk about it, the people that were let go and what happened with that. But if you could talk a little bit about the impact it does have positively, and then a little bit of what's happened because of some of Trump's moves, I will say clearly.
Okay. I'll give you one example locally and with the data that I have from my study. Here's something that people care about, Algebra 1. When do students take Algebra 1? Do you remember when you took Algebra 1? Was it in the 8th grade, the 9th grade, or the 10th grade?
Probably 8th or 9th, I'm not sure which.
Good, very good, because in Cambridge, back in, I think, like 2017, they decided that they were no longer going to teach Algebra 1 in the 8th grade because it was disfavoring the students of color. Okay, and that now they were only going to start offering it in 9th grade, that's when I took Algebra 1 when I went to school. It was back in the 60s. Yeah. 9th grade. That's when you took Algebra 1, and if you were really smart, you could take Algebra 2 in 10th grade, and then after that, you might take I don't know what, calculus or something like that.
And geometry was in there too.
No, yeah, that's right. Geometry could be in 8th grade, but maybe not, more 9th or 10th, yeah. So that was a policy question. And remember, it's also resources questions. Politics is about resources. What resources do I have, and am I using them as wisely as I can?
Okay.
These students have, just these years that they have to be in high school. How are we best going to use those years to get the most result at the end?
Yep.
And there's a lot of evidence that taking Algebra 1 earlier leads to better college acceptance rates and college outcomes. Because if you start Algebra 1 in 8th grade, you're more likely to take Algebra 2 in 9th grade, and then the geometry, then the calculus is kind of the thing you're headed toward. That's those students who've gotten all the way through calculus for many reasons. They're not going to be mathematicians. These skills are just general cognitive, skills that help you in all areas of life. Right. Understanding the rate of change of something or anything is kind of a general.
It does translate to real life.
It does.
There's a logical problem-solving kind of skills.
But if you hamper the students by making them wait to take Algebra 1, first of all, for many of the students, you're missing their peak interest period.
Yeah.
There are some students that are ready in 7th grade. Some are ready in 8th grade. Some are ready in 9th. Some are not ready in 8th grade and should be delayed until 9th. But that should be up to the school counselor and the teacher to decide, not as a policy. We're going to keep everybody out of Algebra 1.
It's one size fits all.
Until 9th. So the parents fought back in Cambridge and they said, look, no, we want our Algebra 1 offered in 8th grade. Sorry. So then if you look at the data from what I have is this data from 6th and 8th grade, and then we were about to do follow-on, but that's the story.
That's the story I want to hear.
That's the bad story. And the other story, too, is this is only restricted access data, so it's not actually publicly available. So I will not be able to give you the result of the study that I was doing, but I can tell you what the question was I was asking. But this is our motivation for we should be getting NCES back up and running fully, because now a lot of data is stuck and a lot of information is stuck and not usable. But we know for those students, they were most concerned about the students of color,
Yeah.
What is the parent's role in getting them into Algebra 1 in 8th grade? And it's really, really important, as it turns out. So that would affect your policy.
Right.
The white kids, it didn't really matter, or the Chinese kids didn't really matter. But the black kids, it mattered. And so that's where, okay, if your concern is about the kids of color, the way to solve it is not to delay Algebra 1 for everyone until 9th grade. That's not equity.
I hear
That's
you.
not equality. Yeah. Equality would be addressing the particular thing that's keeping those students of color, out of Algebra 1 in 8th grade. So that's, I'm just sketching out one research problem that I know is a local situation, but also of national interest. What do we do about that? Because it has a real impact on college, college going, and success, college and career success.
All right. Tell me what the effect was of and what happened in terms of the firing or laying off of people, and how it affected you, and how you think it also has an impact because of the importance of having these standards and knowing how it's affected kids and you personally too, in terms of your career, all of that. It's a big question, but that's the part I want to focus on for the last piece.
Yes. So that was, I think it's interesting that we're having this conversation right now here in February 2026, because right over there I have a calendar that I was using last year that was marking every single day the things that would happen to us in our agency. I worked in NCES, the National Center for Education Statistics. It's in the U.S. Department of Ed. It's in the Institute for Education Sciences. It's the second oldest statistics agency in the country after census. Census was started in 1790. People figured, we really need to know how many people there are in this country and who they are and where they are for policy-making decisions. In 1867, right after the Civil War, so think about that, right after the War for Independence, we need a census. Right after the after the Civil War, 1867, we need it wasn't called the Department of Education, but it was something like that. But it was about getting information on how many schools there were, teachers, students. And I even have a copy of the form that they used in 1867 that they, sent out to get them to count up in all the different states, and local education districts in this country. Who's where and what. So that's a really old statistical agency. And the fact of the U.S. Department of Ed, interestingly, it's not that old. This department only started in 1978.
Wow.
Think about that. Right after the Civil Rights era, they needed to do these things called Title I, Title II, Title III. They needed to distribute money, and as a equity issue, really. So again, similar to what happened after the Civil War, here we get this Department of Ed. Well, think about who's thinking about getting rid of it all the time. The people who may not care that much about issues of equity, because in both cases, it was motivated. The creation of the agency. That's a very important point, yes. Yeah. So these are some themes, just to be aware of. And there we are. We're in the now U.S. Department of Ed, and we're still a statistical agency. We still count people. We count the teachers, but we do more. There was the nation's Children at Risk report in the 80s about the fact of our education system and its failings. So we started thinking, well, we need to find out how the kids are doing. We need to start testing them for things. And so they did start reading, and one of the first, the predecessor to NAEP started in 1972, before actually this Department of Ed. See, this agency's been there the whole time, even before the Department of Ed. But then they ramped it up in the 80s. They had a thing called High School and Beyond. And in the 90s, in elementary, the ECLSK, all the different levels, they sort of, like, over time, got a variety of testing programs going in order for us to start tracking, how are kids doing in this country?
And then with all the loss of people, there's got to be a lot of loss of the kinds of things you were able to do.
To make a test, you need staff. You can't, you can't do all the, on my middle grades longitudinal study, we had hundreds of people. I was the person leading it at the agency, but we had like 3 different contractors and, the different people that went out into the field. We had to go to schools nationwide, and you had to find people in the field to administer those tests, and you had to make the test. You'd get experts in reading and math and other things that we measured, such as executive function and socio-emotional learning and all kinds of things that we looked at a whole child. Not only are we tracking them through these years, but we're looking at the whole child, and we're surveying their teachers, their parents, their school administrators, and the kid themselves. So it's a really full picture of that child, and you can look at this data that we produced and answer many different questions. It's called secondary data. It's the kind of data you can go in and ask your own question about.
Well, I have one last thought for you about this, because I can hear from everything you're saying how much good this does, and also the importance to people and children and the parents, and I hear the threat to it. What I wanted to ask you, and this is in keeping with the title of our show, what gives you hope despite what has happened recently to the Department of Education, the way many of the government agencies are being treated now?
So you're right. So I've said all the wonderful things we were doing, and we were going right along.
And I'm excited about that, and I'm worried we may lose this. These are all threatened by politics.
I know.
What gives you some hope? Because for the people watching, we all need hope right now, and your opinion would matter a lot to hear it.
So right away after this March 11th, notice that we all got, we were 100 people at our agency, 97 were let go. So only 3 people remaining in this very established statistical agency, and all our work stopped, all our contracts were cut. So you can imagine that the people were my colleagues and I too, were in shock.
Very depressing too.
Very depressing. And I can tell you, people acted in all kinds of ways as a result. Some people just tried to say, "Oh, this isn't really happening. It's
almost denial.
It's going to be fine. They'll come to their senses." Many people said that.
But what gives you hope? I want to get it in before the last
But I want to say that what gave me, what I tried to do with this organization, while I'm saying most of what I saw were support groups and people. There was a lot of that kind of thing, actually. There was really very good support for people from all different. Our leader, our commissioner who was dismissed, started a group, and other people did too. So that was good. But I felt like, I know my colleagues, they love their work. We know this work has to continue. So we need to find a way for this to continue, because at some point the government has to come to its senses. It can't, these are
Is that the Agora program?
I'm about to tell you how Agora came about. This was our bright spot in the, this was the way to bring out the positive, to say, guys, let's get together, let's work on some things. This is a nonprofit. It's got a mission, and its mission is to preserve the institutional knowledge of our colleagues.
There you go.
So I invited everyone in to join Agora, and for us to position ourselves so that when the government came to its senses, they could come back to us and rehire us, or give us a contract to do the work if you don't want to have people hired there to do it. The important thing was to give several different venues for the work to come back, because what we value most, not just, of course I'm sorry I lost my job, and I may have a family and I have bills, and I can't survive without a full-time job. But also I care about what I did. I want to have a way to, I want to have a way to express that and bring it back. So that's our answer, is to provide a positive
I'm glad to hear that.
venue for the work.
That's the sense I had, and that's part of why I'm really glad you told the story of what it was like and how it was hurt, and now there's the method that you're taking to try to make it work. So I want to thank you for that story. I know there's so much more to this, but what you just outlined, I hope will give the audience a feeling both about the importance of the kinds of work you were doing in the education and how you found your own way to try to keep groups of people continuing to do research until, as you said, the government comes to its senses.
That's right.
So thank you for that. It was really interesting to hear that, and I really appreciate you coming too.
Thank you, Todd.
Well, thanks, and also thank you everybody for watching us, and tune in again soon for another Sunny Side of the Street. We'll look for you. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Street.